Hello, everyone. I'm down here in the corner today. Welcome to Fiber Pages. I have not recorded anything for you in a while, and I'm going to go ahead and do that today so I can add some more time for you to spend with me reading. Um, Today's book was a side read for a Stitch and Crime Friday night. And so I'm going to go ahead and read this book because some of you do not have it and have not read it. This is The Red Pony by John Steinbeck. This is Mr. Fiber's copy of The Red Pony, and I'm going to read it to you today. So I'm going to set this over here. And the project that I am going to work on, and this book is from 1937. It's very fragile. The project I'm working on is going to be my scrap and crime blanket. Here is where we're at so far. Some of you have finished at least one, and you are going forward and making more than one. I cannot tell you how happy I am that you are excited about these scrap blankets. They are just so much fun, and I'll be showing some of the people's projects here soon. Gosh, they're just looking so good, and I'm just so tickled that you guys are enjoying it. I love a good scrap project. And the stitch that I am doing is the lemon peel. This is what was requested on last Friday's live, and that is where you do a single crochet and then a double crochet. And when you come back around, you do a single in the double and a double in the single. And the yarn I'm using, I think this one is a Loops and Threads. I think. I'm a little tangled here. May have to pull my project through here. But let me go ahead and start reading while I do that. There are only 4 chapters in this book. It's only 100 pages. I'm not sure I will make it through the whole thing today, but we're going to try. Okay, we're just going to try and see what we can do. So, chapter 1 is The Gift. At daybreak, Billy Buck emerged from the bunkhouse and stood for a moment on the porch looking up at the sky. He was a broad, bandy-legged little man with a walrus mustache, with square hands, puffed and muscled on the palms. His eyes were a contemplative, watery gray, and the hair, which protruded from under his Stetson hat, was spiky and weathered. Billy was stuffing his shirt into his blue jeans as he stood on the porch. He unbuckled his belt and tightened it. The belt showed by the warty, shiny places opposite each hole the gradual increase of Billy's middle over a period of years when he had seen to the weather. Billy cleared. When he had seen to the weather, Billy cleared each nostril by holding his forefinger against his nose and blowing fiercely. Then he walked down to the barn, rubbing his hands together. He curried and brushed 2 saddle horses in the stalls, talking quietly to them all the time. And he had hardly finished when the iron triangle started ringing at the ranch house. Billy stuck the brush and the curry comb together and laid them on the rail and went up to breakfast. His action had been so deliberate and yet so wasteless of time that he came to the house while Mrs. Tiflin was still ringing the triangle. She nodded her gray head to him and withdrew into the kitchen. Billy Buck sat down on the steps because he was a cowhand, and it wouldn't be fitting that he should go first into the dining room first. He heard Mr. Tiflin in the house, stamping his feet into his boots. The high, jangling note of the triangle put the boy, Jody, in motion. He was only a little boy, 10 years old, with hair like dusty yellow grass, and with shy, polite gray eyes, and with a mouth that worked when he thought. The triangle picked him up out of sleep. It didn't occur to him to disobey that harsh note. He never had. No one he knew ever had. He brushed the tangled hair out of his eyes and skinned his nightgown off. In a moment he was dressed, blue chambray shirt and overalls. It was late in the summer, so of course there were no shoes to be put on. No shoes to bother with. In the kitchen he waited until his mother got from in front of the sink and went back to the stove. Then he washed himself and brushed back his wet hair with his fingers. His mother turned sharply on him as he left the sink. Jody looked shyly away. "I've got to cut your hair before long," his mother said. "Breakfast's on the table. Go on in so Billy can come." Jody sat at the long table, which was covered with white oilcloth washed through to the fabric in some places. The fried eggs lay in rows on the platter. Jody took 3 eggs on his plate and followed with 3 thick slices of crisp bacon. He carefully scraped a spot of blood from one of the egg yolks. Billy Buck come in. "That won't hurt you," Billy explained. "That's only a sign the rooster leaves." Jody's tall, stern father came in, and Jody knew from the noise on the floor that he was wearing boots. But he looked under the table anyway to make sure. His father turned off the oil lamp over the table, for plenty of morning light now came through the windows. Jody did not ask where his father and Billy Buck were riding that day, but he wished he might go along. His father was a disciplinarian. Jody obeyed him in everything without questions of any kind. Carl Tiflin sat down and reached for the egg platter. "Got the cows ready to go, Billy?" he asked. "In the lower corral," said Billy. "I could just as well take them in alone." "Sure you could, but a man needs company. Besides, your throat gets pretty dry," Carl Tiflin said. Jody's mother put her head in the door. "What time do you think to be back, Carl?" "I can't tell. I've got to see some men in Salinas. Might be gone till dark." The eggs and coffee and big biscuits disappeared rapidly. Jody followed the 2 men out of the house. He watched them mount their horses and drive 6 old milk cows out of the corral and start over the hill toward Salinas. They're going to sell the old cows to the butcher. When they had disappeared over the crown of the ridge, Jody walked up the hill and back in the house. The dogs trotted around. Jody patted their heads. Doubletree mutt. Jody patted their heads. Doubletree Mutt with the big thick tail and yellow eyes, and Smasher the shepherd, who had killed a coyote and lost an ear in doing it. Smasher's one good ear stood up higher than a collie's ear should. Billy Buck said that always happened. After the frenzied greeting, the dogs lowered their noses to the ground in a businesslike way and went ahead, looking back now and then to make sure that the boy was coming. They walked up through the chicken yard and saw the quail eating with the chickens. Smasher chased the chickens a little to keep in practice in case there should ever be sheep to herd. Jody continued on through the large vegetable garden where the green corn was higher than his head. The cow pumpkins were green and small yet. He went on to the sagebrush line where cold spring rain ran out of its pipe and fell into a round wooden tub. He leaned over and drank close to the green mossy wood where the water tasted best. Then he turned and looked back on the ranch, on the low whitewashed house girded with red geraniums, and on the long bunkhouse by the cypress tree where Billy Buck lived alone. Jody could see the great black kettle under the cypress tree. That was where the pigs were scalded. The sun was coming over the ridge now, glaring on the whitewash of the houses and barns, making the wet grass blaze softly. Behind him, in the tall sagebrush, the birds were scampering on the ground, making a great noise among the dry leaves. The squirrels piped shrilly on the side hills. Jody looked along at the farm buildings. He felt an uncertainty in the air, a feeling of change and of loss and of the gain of new and unfamiliar things. Over the hillside, two big black buzzards sailed low down to the ground, and their shadows slipped smoothly and quickly ahead of them. Some animal had died in the vicinity. Jody knew it. It might be a cow, or it might be the remains of a rabbit. The buzzards overlooked nothing. Jody hated them as all decent things hate them, but they could not be hurt because they made away with carrion. After a while, the boy sauntered down the hill again. The dogs had long ago given him up and gone into the brush to do things in their own way. Back through the vegetable garden he went, and he paused for a moment to smash a green muskmelon with his heel, but he was not happy about it. It was a bad thing to do. He knew perfectly well. He kicked dirt over the ruined melon to conceal it. Back at the house, his mother bent over his rough hands, inspecting his fingers and nails. It did little good to start him clean to school, for too many things could happen on the way. She sighed over the black cracks on his fingers, and then gave him his books and his lunch and started him on the mile walk to school. She noticed that his mouth was working a good deal this morning. Today's coffee is a Crazy Cup medium roast, and it is caramel and vanilla in my Texas cup. Y'all leave me a message what you're drinking and what you are working on while you're watching. Jody started his journey. He filled his pockets with little pieces of white quartz that lay in the road, and every so often he took a shot at a bird or at some rabbit that had stayed sunning itself in the road for too long. At the crossroads over the bridge, he met two friends, and the three of them walked to school together. making ridiculous strides and being rather silly. School had just opened 2 weeks before. There was still a spirit of revolt among the pupils. It was 4 o'clock in the afternoon when Jody topped the hill and looked down on the ranch again. He looked for the saddle horses, but the corral was empty. His father was not back yet. He went slowly, then toward the afternoon chores. At the ranch house, he found his mother sitting on the porch mending socks. "There's 2 donuts in the kitchen for you," she said. Jody slid to the kitchen and returned with half of one of the donuts already eaten and in his mouth. His mother asked him what he had learned in school that day, but she didn't listen to his donut muffled answer. She interrupted. "Jody, tonight, see you fill the wood box clear full. Last night you crossed the sticks, and it wasn't only about half full. Lay the sticks flat tonight. And Jody, some of the hens are hiding eggs, or else the dogs are eating them. Look about in the grass and see if you can find any nests." Jody, still eating, went out and did his chores. He saw the quail come down to eat with the chickens when he threw out the grain. For some reason, his father was proud to have them come in. He never allowed any shooting near the house for fear the quail might go away. When the wood box was full, Jody took his .22 rifle up to the cold spring at the brush line. He drank again and then aimed the gun at all manner of things, at rocks, at birds on the wing, at the big black pig kettle under the cypress tree, but he didn't shoot, for he had no cartridges and wouldn't have until he was 12. If his father had seen him aim the rifle in the direction of the house, he would have put the cartridges off another year. Jody remembered this and did not point the rifle down the hill again. 2 years was enough to wait for cartridges. Nearly all his father's presents were given with reservations, which hampered their values somehow. It was good discipline. The supper waited until dark for his father's return. When at last he came in with Billy Buck, Jody could smell the delicious brandy on their breaths. Inwardly he rejoiced, for his father sometimes talked to him when he smelled of brandy, sometimes even told things he had done in the wild days when he was a boy. After supper, Jody sat by the fireplace, and his shy, polite eyes sought the room corners, and he waited for his father to tell what it was he contained. For Jody knew he had news of some sort, but he was disappointed. His father pointed a stern finger at him. "You'd better go to bed, Jody. I'm going to need you in the morning." That wasn't so bad. Jody liked to do things he had to do as long as they weren't routine things. He looked at the floor and his mouth worked out a question before he spoke it. "What are we going to do in the morning? Kill a pig?" he asked softly. "Never you mind. You better get to bed." When the door was closed behind him, Jody heard his father and Billy Buck chuckling, and he knew it was a joke of some kind. And later, when he lay in bed trying to make words out of the murmurs in the other room, he heard his father protest. "But Ruth, I didn't give much for him." Judy heard the hoot owls hunting mice down by the barn, and he heard a fruit tree limb tapping against the house. A cow was lowing when he went to sleep. When the triangle sounded in the morning, Jody dressed more quickly even than usual. In the kitchen, while he washed his face and combed back his hair, his mother addressed him irritably. "Don't you go out until you get a good breakfast in you." He went into the dining room and sat at the long white table. He took a steaming hot cake from the platter, arranged 2 fried eggs on it, covered them with another hot cake, and squashed the whole thing with his fork. His father and Billy Buck came in. Jody knew from the sound on the floor that both of them were wearing flat-heeled shoes, but he peered under the table to make sure. His father turned off the oil lamp, for the day had arrived, and he looked stern and disciplinary. But Billy Buck didn't look at Jody at all. He avoided the shy, questioning eyes of the boy and soaked a whole piece of toast in his coffee. Carl Tifland said crossly, "You come with us after breakfast." Jody had trouble with his food then, for he felt kind of doom in the air. After Billy had tilted his saucer and drained the coffee, which he slopped into it, and had wiped his hands on his jeans, the two men stood up from the table and went out into the morning light together. Jody respectfully followed a little behind them. He tried to keep his mind from running ahead, tried to keep it absolutely motionless. His mother called, "Carl, don't you let it keep him from school." They marched past the cypress, where a single tree hung from a limb to butcher the pigs on, and past the black iron kettle, so it was not a pig killing. The sun shone over the hill and threw long dark shadows of the trees and buildings. They crossed a stubble field to shortcut to the barn. Jody's father unhooked the door and they went in. They had been walking toward the sun on the way down. The barn was black as night in contrast, and warm from the hay and from the beasts. Jody's father moved over toward the one box stall. "Come here," he ordered. Jody could begin to see things now. He looked into the box stall, and then he stepped back quickly. A red pony colt was looking at him out of the stall. Its intense ears were forward, and a light of disobedience was in its eyes. Its coat was rough and thick as an Airedale's fur, and its mane was long and tangled. Judy's throat collapsed in on itself, and he cut his breath short. "He needs a good currying," his father said. "And if I ever hear of you not feeding him or leaving his tail and his or leaving his stall dirty, I'll sell him off in a minute." Jody couldn't bear to look at the pony's eyes anymore. He gazed down at his hands for a moment, and he asked very shyly, "Mine?" No one answered him. He put his hand out towards the pony. Its gray nose came close, sniffing loudly, and then the lips drew back, and the strong teeth closed on Jody's fingers. The pony shook its head up and down and seemed to laugh with amusement. Jody regarded his bruised fingers. "Well," he said with pride, "well, I guess he can bite all right." The two men laughed, somewhat in relief. Carl Tiflin went out of the barn and walked up a side hill to be by himself, for he was embarrassed. But Billy Buck stayed. It was easier to talk to Billy Buck. Jody asked again, "Mine?" Billy became professional in tone. "Sure. That is, if you look out for him and break him right. I'll show you how. He's just a colt. You can't ride him for some time." Jody put out his bruised hand again, and this time the red pony let his nose be rubbed. I ought to have a carrot, Jody said. Where'd we get him, Billy? Bought him at a sheriff's auction, Billy explained. A show went broke in Salinas and had debts. The sheriff was selling off their stuff. The pony stretched out his nose and shook the forelock from his wild eyes. Jody stroked the nose a little. He said softly, "There isn't a saddle?" Billy Buck laughed. I forgot. Come along. In the harness room, he lifted down a little saddle of red Morocco leather. It's just a show saddle, Billy Buck said despairingly. It isn't practical for the brush, but it was cheap at the sale. Jody couldn't trust himself to look at the saddle either, and he couldn't speak at all. He brushed the shining red leather with fingertips, and after a long time he said, "It'll look pretty on him, though." He thought of the grandest and prettiest things he knew. If he hasn't a name already, I think I'll call him Gabalin Mountains, he said. Billy Buck knew how he felt. It's a pretty long name. Why don't you just call him Gabalin? That means hawk. That would be a fine name for him. Billy felt glad. If you will collect tail hair, I might be able to make a hair rope for you sometime. You could use it for a hackamore. Jody wanted to go back to the box stall. Could I lead him to school, do you think, to show the kids? But Billy shook his head. He's not even halter broke yet. We had a time getting him here. Had to almost drag him. You better be starting for school, though. I'll bring the kids to see him here this afternoon, Jody said. 6 boys came over the hill half an hour early that afternoon, running hard. Their heads down, their forearms working, their breath whistling. They swept by the house and cut across the stubble field to the barn. And then they stood self-consciously before the pony. And they looked at Jody with eyes in which there was a new admiration and a new respect. Before today, Jody had been a boy, dressed in overalls and a blue shirt. Quieter than most, even suspected of being a little cowardly. Now he was different. Out of 1,000 centuries, they drew the ancient admiration of the footman for the horseman. They knew instinctively that a man on a horse is spiritually as well as physically bigger than a man on foot. They knew that Jody had been miraculously lifted out of equality with them and had been placed over them. Gabalin put his head out of the stall and sniffed them. "Why'n't you ride him?" the boys cried. "Why'n't you braid his tail with ribbons like in the fair? When you going to ride him?" Jody's courage was up. He too felt superiority of the horseman. "He's not old enough. Nobody can ride him for a long time. I'm going to train him on the long halter. Billy Buck is going to show me how." "Well, we can't even lead him around a little?" "He isn't even halter broke," Jody said. He wanted to be completely alone when he took the pony out the first time. "Come and see the saddle." They were speechless at the red Moroccan saddle, completely shocked out of comment. "It isn't much use in the brush," Jody explained. "It'll look pretty on him, though." Lost my place. "Maybe I'll ride bareback when I go into the brush." "How you going to rope a cow without a saddle horn?" "Maybe I'll get another saddle for every day." "My father might want me to help him with the stock." He let them feel the red saddle It showed them the brass chain throat latch on the bridle and on the big brass buttons at each temple where the headstall and brow band crossed. The whole thing was too wonderful. They had to go away after a little while, and each boy in his mind searched among his possessions for a bribe worthy of offering in return for a ride on the red pony when the time should come. Jody was glad when they had gone. He took brush and currycomb from the wall and took down the barrier of the box stall and stepped cautiously in. The pony's eyes glittered and he edged around into kicking position, but Jody touched him on the shoulder and rubbed his high arched neck as he had always seen Billy Buck do, and he crooned, "So, boy," in a deep voice. The pony gradually relaxed his tenseness. Joey, Joey, Jody curried and brushed until a pile of dead hair lay in the stall, and until the pony's coat had taken on a deep red shine. Each time he finished, he thought it might have been done better. He braided the mane into a dozen little pigtails and braided the forelock, and then he undid them and brushed the hair out straight again. Jody did not hear his mother enter the barn. She was angry when she came. But when she looked in at the pony and at Jody's working over him, she felt a curious pride rise up in her. "Have you forgot the wood box?" she asked gently. "It's not far from dark, and there's not a stick of wood in the house, and the chickens aren't fed." Jody quickly put up his tools. "I forgot, ma'am." "Well, after this, do your chores first. Then you won't forget. I expect you'll forget lots of things now if I don't keep an eye on you." Okay, y'all. I think that is where we're going to stop for today. Just an introduction into this book. I will be back to do some more, and I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you, everyone, for watching. Stay tuned for more. Have fun today.